The threat of a third world war, which could escalate into a nuclear conflict, has once again loomed over humanity. Let's recall the times of the Cold War. Back then, the world was on the brink of catastrophe, with nuclear weapons seeming almost inevitable. Diplomacy saved the situation, but the fear of a possible apocalypse made people prepare for the worst. In schools, kindergartens, and workplaces, regular drills were conducted. Children and adults knew how to protect themselves in the event of a nuclear explosion. Today, unfortunately, we are once again facing a similar threat. And although we hope that the use of nuclear weapons will not occur, it's better to be prepared for any scenario. So, what do you need to know to survive a nuclear explosion? The first thing you will notice is a blinding flash of light. Even on a clear sunny day, it will be visible for miles around. This flash is the first signal of a nuclear explosion, and it brings serious destruction. The radiation lasts only a few seconds, but its intensity is such that it can cause severe burns on exposed skin and temporarily blind you for 5 to 10 minutes if you look at it with unprotected eyes. The powerful light radiation also causes fires in forests and cities, disables gas and electric networks, and destroys boilers and heating stoves. Wooden surfaces become charred, and clothing and covers on equipment can catch fire. Historical evidence, such as the shadows of Hiroshima, confirms these destructive effects. In a ground nuclear explosion, approximately 30 to 50% of the bomb's energy is converted into this deadly light radiation. To survive it, the best shelter in a city setting would be a basement with a reinforced concrete ceiling, as reinforced concrete effectively absorbs gamma rays. If you receive advance notice of a missile nuclear attack, you will have about 30 minutes to prepare. This is the case with strategic weapons. However, tactical nuclear weapons, which can be dropped from aircraft or launched from artillery installations, will not give you much time to react. If you find yourself outside during an air raid and notice a flash, act quickly. Light travels faster than the shock wave that follows it. Therefore, upon seeing the flash, immediately drop face down. If you can determine the direction of the explosion's epicenter, lie with your head away from it. The best protection is to be in the shadow of any object or building. If you have a hood or jacket, pull it over your head. If not, cover your head with your hands. It's important to remember that there may be multiple shock waves, so only stand up after the second one. The quicker you drop, the less severe the burns will be. Every second counts here. The next 10 minutes after the explosion are a critical time that can save your life. These minutes provide an opportunity to take cover and prepare for subsequent actions, as following the light and shock wave will be a fireball and nuclear mushroom cloud. It's important to remember that timely reaction and knowledge of survival basics can be crucial in such situations. After the bright flash on the horizon, a fireball appears. It seems incredibly bright, so much so that its glow surpasses even the light of the sun. Never look at this ball without eye protection. It can cause serious damage. Over time, the fireball begins to expand, its size increases, and it slowly rises upwards, gradually losing its brightness. A few seconds after its appearance, the fireball transforms into billowing clouds. These clouds are accompanied by a column of dust and smoke rising from the ground, creating the characteristic mushroom shape. This is how the term nuclear mushroom originated. If the explosion occurred over water, the column would consist of water droplets, and if on land, it would be composed of earth and debris. In any case, such fallout is extremely dangerous to humans because it is radioactive. However, you have some time to act before its arrival. Along with the fireball and cloud, you will hear a shock wave. The sound of this wave resembles the rumble of thunder, but it is much more powerful and prolonged. It carries with it a destructive force capable of causing enormous damage not only from the explosion itself, but also from the debris of buildings, trees, earth, and glass that are scattered around. The most crucial moment is the 10 minutes following the flash. During this time, it is essential to quickly find a safe shelter to avoid radioactive fallout. You will be alerted to a nuclear explosion through radio, the internet, or the sound of sirens echoing through the area. It is important not to look at the nuclear mushroom cloud, and to cover your face and respiratory pathways with a scarf, handkerchief, or any clothing. Debris and fragments will be flying toward you, so move to the nearest bomb shelter, remembering to take your pets with you. Remember that metro stations will close 5 minutes after the alarm is announced, so use apartment building basements, metro tunnels, or other underground shelters. If underground shelter is unavailable, try to ascend above the 10th floor and find the most isolated room without windows, sealing any door gaps with cloth. Apartment residents can take refuge in the bathroom, toilet, or pantry. Once you are in a safe place, do not leave until official permission is granted. This is likely to happen 7 to 10 days after the explosion. You need to have hermetically sealed supplies of water and food with you. This will help you survive until it is safe to go outside. Once you are safe, the first thing to do is remove the outer clothing you were wearing at the time of the explosion to minimize the risk of radiation contamination. If possible, thoroughly wash exposed areas of skin with water and soap. If you have wounds, they need to be treated and cleaned. These actions will help prevent potential consequences of radiation exposure, and you can wait for further instructions from rescue services. It is important to remember that in the event of a nuclear disaster, the highest priority remains the protection of health and safety. The first thing to do is to cover your mouth and nose with a mask or respirator, which will help prevent radioactive particles from entering your body. This is especially crucial in the first few hours after the explosion when the radioactive cloud may still be quite dense. It is equally important to turn off ventilation and tightly close all doors to minimize the entry of radioactive particles into the room. It is advisable to seal the gaps around windows and doors with wet cloths. This is a simple yet effective measure for additional protection. During such moments, it is extremely important to keep track of news and instructions from authorities, so radio or the internet are your main allies. Do not go outside until you receive a safety signal. When the danger has passed, you can finally open the windows and ensure air circulation. This will help remove any residual radioactive particles that may have entered the premises. However, during the first few days after the explosion, it is recommended to consume only those products that were stored in hermetically sealed packaging and drink water from bottles that were tightly sealed. Do not forget about pets, they also need protection. It is important to understand that in such a situation, everyone is equal, and regardless of your social status, your safety and health come first. There is a widespread belief that in the event of a nuclear strike, a so-called nuclear winter will occur, and all living things will perish. However, it is worth noting that this claim did not originate in scientific circles but in a science fiction story by American writer Poul Anderson in 1947. He described a future with a hypothetical, incredibly large nuclear arsenal. It was only in the 1980s that some researchers began to seriously consider this hypothesis, suggesting that fires from burning forests and cities could release a massive amount of ash into the atmosphere, cooling the planet for years. However, this assumption also turned out to be unreliable. For example, after the atomic bombing of Hiroshima in August 1945, the city seemed like a scorched desert. It was believed that no plant could grow there for decades, and anyone daring to stay would be doomed. However, by the fall of the same year, the first shoots of plants began to sprout from the scorched earth. Many residents, despite the catastrophe, remained in the city, helping to extinguish fires and treat the wounded. Moreover, they lived long lives and were able to have healthy children. Since nuclear weapons have different energy potentials, the time when it is safe to leave shelter will vary. It depends on the bomb's yield, wind direction, and your distance from the explosion's epicenter. This is why having means of communication is extremely important. This way you will receive up-to-date safety information from competent authorities. If you have a dosimeter, it will help you independently determine the radiation level outside the shelter. A radiation level up to 50 microengens per hour is considered safe, and the safest level is up to 20 microengens per hour. The more destruction around, the higher the risk of radiation danger. In an emergency situation, protection is your main priority. If you have a gas mask, you should use it. If not, wear thick clothing with a hood and protective goggles to minimize exposure to alpha and beta radiation. Long-sleeved clothing will help further protect your skin. Avoid dirt roads and choose paved ones to minimize contact with radioactive dust. Keep outdoor clothing and shoes away from your sleeping area to avoid additional risk. Radioactive dust, like regular dust, has the unpleasant tendency to settle on our belongings and hair. Collars, shoulders, and elbows are particularly vulnerable, as dust accumulates there the fastest. And, of course, don't forget about the abdomen. Since we often touch it, there's an increased risk of transferring radiation to other parts of the body. It's important to remember that even greens and salads can pose a threat if they have grown in open beds. In such a situation, it's safer to consume vegetables and fruits grown in greenhouses covered with glass or polycarbonate, and wash them thoroughly before consumption. Mushrooms and berries in a radioactive zone become real accumulators of radionuclides and heavy metals. Therefore, their collection and consumption are categorically not recommended. Even if they look appetizing, it's better not to risk your health. Now let's talk about iodine. When there is a threat of radioactive iodine release, potassium iodide comes to the rescue. It saturates the thyroid gland with stable beneficial iodine, leaving no room for the radioactive counterpart. This significantly reduces the risk of developing thyroid cancer in the future. However, it's important to remember that potassium iodide only protects the thyroid, and it should be taken only in the event of a real threat, as announced by authorities or medical services. 1 tablet of potassium iodide provides protection for 24 hours. In most cases, this is quite sufficient. However, if the threat persists, it may be necessary to take 1 dose every day until the situation stabilizes. For adults over 2 years old, the dose is 125 milligrams, which corresponds to half a tablet. Children under 2 years old should be given 40 milligrams. If you do not have access to tablets, you can use a regular 5% iodine solution. Adults over 14 years old will need 40 drops, which should be added to warm milk or water. Children aged 5 to 14 years require 20 drops. However, iodine should not be given internally to children under 5 years old. In this case, an iodine grid applied to the skin in the appropriate dosage is suitable. It is important not to abuse potassium iodide and to use it only on the recommendation of doctors or rescue services. Side effects can range from stomach upset to allergic reactions and gland inflammation. In rare cases, improper intake may negatively affect the thyroid gland. We hope that you never need these tips and that your life will be long and happy. However, in case of an emergency, this information could become vital for you and your loved ones. We appreciate your interest. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to our channel to stay updated on all important news.